Welcome to Home Care, Doors Open, where we discuss licensing, operations, and scaling your home care business. Whether you're just opening your doors or looking to unlock new doors to growth and success, this podcast is for you. Let's begin.
All right, hello everybody. This is Lucas Carroll from the Business of Senior Care. I'm back with another podcast episode of Home Care Doors Open. Today we have an exciting guest to talk to. This is Chuck Bailey, who's the founder of True North. Chuck, welcome aboard.
Lucas, great to see you again. Hope you're doing well today.
Awesome. I'm super excited to talk to you today and for our audience just to get some nuggets of information for somebody who's been an entrepreneur and home care owner, amongst many other things, for a number of years. I wanted to see maybe if we could start, just tell us about your background and kind of the home care space and your multi-unit operations and some of the successes that you've had, and then your current venture.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. Appreciate it. Great to be here again. I've been in home care for 19 years. I spent 24 years in the corporate world and had the opportunity to buy my first home care franchise around 19 years ago, and I fell in love with the space. Like many business owners in this space, I had a story from a family standpoint that, I got on, one too many planes to China in my corporate life, and I saw that there had to be, a better opportunity. I've always been very involved in my community and church and family, and there was a need that I saw. I wanted to take advantage of the opportunity that I had, so I jumped into the deep end of the pool as a franchise owner, as the 9th franchisee in Bright Star Care. And so it was an exciting time for me to go from a very large company that I was involved with and running to, a company where I was unlocking the doors and cleaning the bathrooms, every day on day one, like many startups do. But I had the opportunity to grow my business as a multi-unit owner, learn the home care industry, become passionate about it, and ultimately ended up on the franchisor side of things in both an operating role and ultimately as president of a large home care franchise system. And then in 2012, I had the opportunity to venture out and do a startup on my own again, which is True North, and today was known as True North Holdings. And we've been now providing back office outsourcing services, primarily bookkeeping, medical billing, and revenue cycle management services to more than 400 franchise locations in 48 states. So we love the space. I love the space. We have 65 people that come to work every day trying to help franchisees grow their businesses.
That's amazing. That's amazing. From your leadership roles at Bright Star, how did you get the entrepreneurial idea for True North? What were some things that kind of led into, hey, this is a great space for us to support franchisees and home care owners?
Well, it was, I knew when I left Bright Star, and there's a whole other story to that, but basically I had a family situation back in Pittsburgh, and Bright Star was headquartered in Chicago, and so I had to move my family back to Pittsburgh, take care of my father, prior to his passing, and I was commuting back and forth to Chicago, and I woke up and I found myself back into the same situation where I was gone 40 weeks a year on the road in hotel rooms. And so I knew I wanted to go build a business. And I thought it was going to be more around my corporate career. And as I started True North, it was a business services company, but all my friends from home care kept calling and saying, hey, can you help me do X, Y, and Z? And what I found was there was a common thread amongst all of that. One is there was a gap in the market for quality business outsourcing that we could go fill based on our knowledge and experience in the industry. And secondly, there was tremendous growth in the market. So it was a way for us to go in and fill that. And as I said, 12 years later now, we have over 65 full-time W-2 staff in our corporate headquarters that basically service 100% home care agencies. It's what we do. It's what we love.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I think what I'm curious to get your perspective on, unique perspective, is that from our audience is a lot of folks who are thinking about getting into home care. They're entrepreneur, thinking about owning, whether it's a franchise or an independent, and getting into this space. And maybe they are an accountant. Maybe they, work for, the government. Maybe they come from all walks of life, but they're interested in helping our senior population and starting a business. What For that type of audience, what would you say is the current state of affairs for the home care industry, and kind of your words of advice about getting into this space?
So, boy, there's a lot of sub questions in that question there, and I wish we had more time today because this is what I live for. I love startups. I love helping people get into business and then grow and mature. So to break that down a little bit, I've helped probably 50 home care agencies from brand new startup to now tremendous growth in the market. Our largest agency is doing over 40 million a year in sales, and I've been on their board since day one when they had zero sales. But if you look at the industry today, we are at the infancy stage of what this industry will become over over the next 15 years. I've been in it for 19, and the industry was growing tremendously then, and it's only going to get bigger just because of the demographics, the aging population. But the challenges are the the demand is far outstripping supply today. It's lack of caregivers is a real challenge. Immigration policy is a moving target, and I know the industry will be challenged here. But with that said, I don't know that there's truly a lack of caregivers out there as much as there is a lack of quality companies that employ great people. And so when I look at, the first part of your question is, do you have to be a healthcare expert to be in the home care business? And the short answer is no. I'm not an accountant, although I run an accounting, bookkeeping, and tax firm. I'm an ops guy. That's what I've done. When I ran my home care agency, I came out of the manufacturing world here. Yes, I think the common thread is that this is the hardest job that you'll ever do in your life because it's a 7 by 24 business in terms of a piece of your mind that is engaged in the industry. But what makes it easy is when you care and from your heart. I think it takes a special person to be in this industry. But while healthcare experience is helpful, some of the most successful owners I've worked with don't come from healthcare. They were in service-based industries, or they came out of manufacturing, or they were finance, or they were accounting. It is not a common thread at all to have a healthcare experience. The other thing that I think, Lucas, is a common thread is all of those owners that have been successful are great at building teams. They're great at understanding customers, and most importantly, they care. And that's why I say throughout all of the agencies that we've helped and throughout all the business owners I know, there's two things that I believe an owner has to be great at and they can't delegate. One is they have to be the number one salesperson in the business. Their job is to grow sales, or what I call drive revenue and build the team is number two. You don't have to be the best salesperson, but you have to be the one that's responsible for driving revenue, and secondly, the responsible for building the team. For example, in your space, I thought I had to be great at compliance and knowing all of the rules for licensure. And I spent hours and hours and hours working on something like that. And reality is there's people that do this for a living, right? There's people like you that do this for a living, and all I had to do is pick up the phone. And I probably throttled my growth by 3-4 months working on licensure in Illinois because I thought I needed to know that. And the reality is there's a lot of the business functions that can be outsourced.
Yeah. Which then would lead you back to focusing on those two things that you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, in the first period of starting up a home care agency, I think you have to be aware of everything. I think your core has to be drive revenue and build a team, but then quickly find partners or employees that can be great at all the other things you do. So building that team is all about finding that number 2, number 3, and number 4 employee in your team. And I'm guilty of this as well. We're all trying to conserve cost, conserve funds when we're doing a startup, but perhaps paying that $20,000 more a year for that solid number two is they don't just do the job, they do it 5 times better than that person that is maybe going to make $20,000 a year less. So I've been stingy in that, and what I found is invest in your people, build that team, and you'll grow 5 times faster.
Absolutely. To that point, number one, I'm curious your take on this, is that when we work with a lot of new startups, that they're scared of sales, that they aren't maybe necessarily the most outgoing people. They don't have a background in it. It's one of the 2 most important things that you're saying, which I totally agree with. How do you coach somebody through that to say, hey, I'm not natural at sales, but it's my responsibility? How do you balance that and still grow as an agency?
So this is really hard, is that if you're not great at sales, you tend to just completely stay away from it and say, I'm going to go hire somebody to do that. But the reality is, as the franchise owner, as the home care agency owner, whether you're franchised or not franchised, you carry the most powerful card in the room that says business owner or agency owner. And so with that comes an immense responsibility. I have to tell the truth. I have to be humble. I have to solve problems, and the buck stops with me. And so those are attributes and characteristics of a business that customers value. And so if we just walk into the room and exhibit those values, you are already selling. You don't have to know all the right words. We don't have to be able to do the fancy presentations. It's really just about connecting with people. And the mechanics of sales, we may have to outsource to grow. Lead generation, presentations, doing all the fancy networking groups, all of those things to make, the marketing, to get exposure. But in the end, I believe people buy from people. And more importantly, in the home care business, people buy from people they trust. And you've put the trust in yourself to go build a business. The people that you hire have put their trust in you. And so by human nature, all we have to do is walk in the room, and if we're willing to have a conversation, people are going to trust us. And if we're genuine, I think it's the best sales tactic in the world, is just be yourself.
Be yourself. I agree. Well, good. So I want to see if I can pick your brain on some nuts and bolts operating a home care business. If you're like KPIs, if you're the owner of the business and you're at the beginning stages or you're established, what are 2 or 3 KPIs that are the lifeblood of your business that you should be watching as the owner?
Yeah. So this is an area that home care agency owners either find boring, intimidating, or somebody else's job. It's related to tax and compliance, the whole financial side of things. And every successful owner that I know in the home care space has said, I am going to make financial performance part of what I do. I have to recruit great people. I have to provide great service, quality, and caring to my clients. I have to treat my employees well, but I also have to have a reasonable financial cadence that I run my business by. All right, so we come in, we make coffee, we turn on the lights, whatever order that is, we do our job and we go home. Part of what True North does is we inject a financial cadence into that daily workflow out there, so it becomes part of the habit. And what I found over the years, there's really 3 metrics that matter. If you do these 3 things, you can ignore everything else in your business. First one is average weekly sales. So I specifically say weekly. Generally, we pay our caregivers weekly. Maybe we pay them bi-weekly, but most agencies, we're paying on a weekly cycle. Why not measure sales on a weekly cycle? Often people measure it monthly, or what did I do last year, or whatever. This is a business with a lot of client turnover, a lot of caregiver turnover. So I look at average weekly sales. It gives me a sense of the velocity of the business. I can't wait till the end of the month to get my financial reports to see how I did. Number two is gross margin. And gross margin is the lifeblood of the home care industry. And in order to measure gross margin, we have to match our weekly sales with our weekly cost of goods sold. And we know that this is a labor business, and the plus the number one source of non-labor cost is workers' comp. It's a high workers' comp industry. So when I look at the profitability of a business, it is measured in the form of gross margin, measured at minimum on a monthly basis, ideally on a weekly basis, because that's going to give me a clear indication of, am I running too much overtime? Are my pay rates exceeding my bill rates, or is it time to put a price increase through? This will guide me to not leaking 1, 2, 3% margin. And then the final thing is what I call salary cap. So we have our variable labor costs that are our caregivers that are in the field, taking care of our patients, taking care of our families. But then we have the office staff that does recruiting and scheduling and billing and compliance and all those things. Those are largely a fixed cost. I like to measure that as a percent of sales, because what that will do is tell me the efficiency of my office staff. Or better yet, when my office staff is screaming for help because we're growing so quickly, I know whether or not it's on me because I haven't built great systems, or truly have we outrun our coverage. And salary cap will tell me that story.
That is an interesting metric. What are some salary cap? What are some benchmarks that you like, percentage benchmark for salary cap?
So I'll run back up, and average weekly sales is as it's measured. How much should I bill this week? That's the easy one there. Gross margin is simply my cost of goods sold divided by sales, and for most home care agencies, I like to see us in the 40 to 45% range. If you're a really high volume with lots of live-in caregivers or long shifts, your margins may drop into the mid to high 30s, but 42% is kind of the minimum I look for. And then salary cap, I look for about 13% of sales. And when you add all this together, you have your gross margin at 40 minus a salary cap of 13, maybe 15%, and then normally administrative costs are fixed. That would be the next thing I would measure. But the reality, these are things like rent and insurance and all that. They're business decisions. So I don't look at those as closely, but generally those are 7, 8, 9%. So what's left over after merchant processing fees, all that is about 15% EBITDA, right? Or operating income, depending on how you want to measure your business. So 40% gross margin, 42%, 15% salary cap, 7.5% admin, and 5 or 6% of kind of all other merchant processing. If you're a franchise, your royalties, things like that, your marketing fund fees, but then puts you down to 12, 15% bottom line. And if you're a new entrant into the market, you can sort of look at it and say, all right, well, what kind of money what kind of sales do I need to generate in order to make up for my corporate W-2 salary that I'm leaving, maybe, or what I could have done by going to work for somebody else? I simply say, all right, we'll take and divide that number by about 15%. That's what you got to sell a year. And then final part of that, Lucas, is I then tell folks that come to me saying, should I buy a franchise? And I say, real simple, go look at the guy in the mirror when he brushes his teeth and say, is that the guy that I can bet on to go sell that amount of business? And if your answer is yes, then go buy it. Open your agency from scratch or go buy a franchise, but bet on that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such good points. I was thinking, for our viewers that are thinking, like, you get started on your business, whether it's a franchise or not a franchise, and then they don't necessarily know like when agencies usually run into roadblocks. So, is there a revenue level that you see for startups after they experience some success and they hire caregivers and they're generating revenue and they get some office staff? is there some common areas where you see different home care agencies that sort of struggle and maybe go back a little bit and need to do something different in order to move to the next milestone?
I think there's a couple ways to answer that question. The first one is that first milestone is break even, right? So I think first of all, we have to understand the definition of what break even is, because that's that milestone you have to get past. And everybody overcomplicates, and there's a bunch of MBAs probably running around the room that want to define that for you. But as a a former franchise owner on a startup, the definition of break even was really, really simple to me, Lucas. It was the day in which I no longer had to write a check for the thrill of going to work. Right? That's the definition of break even, and I had to know what that number is. And so that's the number that matters in a startup. You calculate your overhead costs, figure out what your break even is. If you don't know, ask your accountant, your bookkeeper, call me, I'll help you figure that out. But it's a foot race, an absolute foot race to break even. And as soon as I get there, the game changes, because I'm okay breaking even and doing the right things. I'm to grow my business. I'm not okay losing money and doing the right things, because then it's a hobby. So that break even point is, for me, around 10,000, 11,000 a week in sales, or roughly about $500,000. So it's a foot race to break even. After that, where businesses generally start to plateau is 500,000 to $1 million in sales a year. And the reason why is they fail to implement systems. They are building their business on brute force. They're bootstrapping it. They're doing all the things you do as a startup. They're fixing the printer, and but they failed to build systems around HR, recruiting, scheduling, billing, collections. All things run through them, and that's the biggest trap that we fall into as business owners. Is we have a need to control all those things, or we don't know how to get past those things. And it's a bit self-serving for guys like you and me to say this, but this is the time when you need to bring in outside resources. If not to outsource the process to them, have a conversation to figure out what it is that you can be great at. Because one of the biggest mistakes I've made is thinking that I was great at everything, right? We've all been there. And the reality is, we can only be great. We have the capacity to be great at a handful of things. And the other things, build a system around it, hire great people to run that system. And if you fail to hire great people, go find an expert in the industry and bring them under your tent. And that will give you the ability to push beyond that $1 million a year, in sales, that 50,000 a week to get to 2.5 million, right? That's the penultimate goal, is get to 2.5 million.
Absolutely. Chuck, you're referencing bringing in good people. What are some strategies that you've seen to find good, talented people that can help you at your agency?
Yeah. So I think we have to look at two different categories of people. One is your leadership team, the people that are responsible for your recruiting and retention and your scheduling and your operations, your billing and all that stuff. Those people may or may not come out of the healthcare space, but they have to, first and foremost, understand what they're getting into. This is not any other industry. Home care is emotionally challenging, and so you interview for people that care first, and then they have excellent technical and operational skills, and we go look for those people. They may have come out of another industry that had a lot of moving parts. Surprisingly, I've seen people come out of the restaurant industry, because that's a moving part, an industry with a lot of moving parts, high turnover, all of that. They're used to juggling multiple balls. Those people are successful in this industry, and if they happen to come from home care, that's even better yet. The other side is our caregiver workforce, whether they're CNAs, HHAs, caregivers, nurses, LPNs, whatever. My answer today is different than it was 2 years ago, perhaps even a year ago. My answer used to be, let's go out and screen people that match our values and care as much about the business as we do, and we know that they will represent us in front of that family as if we were there ourselves. Those were the things that I would always talk about there. But I think now, while those attributes hold true, everybody else is looking for those same exact people. And we have to look at recruiting as a sales process. We are competing for caregivers. All home care agencies are competing for the same caregivers, and caregivers have the power. So much so that at many of the recent conferences that I've been at in the home care industry, more than 40% of the agendas have been dedicated to caregiver recruiting and retention strategies. That's how important it is in the industry. So I look at who's going to get the best caregivers to fuel their growth over the next 3 years are the people that are best at selling caregivers that they're the best agency to work for. All right. There's this whole nurturing cycle that if you look at any funnel-based sales process, we've been doing on the sales side of the operation for years. Build a funnel, put people in the top, run them through the funnel, and sell them a car, right? Or sell them whatever. I think caregiver recruiting is the exact same model. So much so that a couple of months ago we launched a new division of True North called CareForce Recruiter that takes what we learned about the sales process and funnels and uses that funnel process to recruit the best caregivers, leveraging AI technology and a lot of other things. And technology in recruiting is going to change the landscape for most agencies over the next year.
And that's, I remember when we were at the conference talking about this, that what you're developing is sort of capturing if the caregiver has the power, and they're able to maybe, and I want to put, I want to get your expertise on it, but they're able to, Uber their services out, and the home care agency that is the most culture fit, the best culture oriented, has the best funnel in place, is the ones that will be able to utilize their services. Is that fair to say?
I think it's perfect, Lucas, and a great way to put it here. If great home care agencies don't emerge to be the employer of choice, then great caregivers will have no choice other than take an Uber approach where they just go out and work for different agencies. And I think the industry is trying to migrate that way, and make it so there's a marketplace for caregivers to go work for agencies that will either pay them the most or give them the best shifts. And I think that technology is there. I think there's a market for that. But I believe the traditional model of being a great agency will still win the lion's share of the best caregivers. And here's why, is I think people want to be part of a team naturally. I don't think they want to be Uber drivers or Uber nurses or Uber caregivers. I think they want to be part of a team. I think they want to be part of a great culture, and I think they want to work with a company that cares as much as they do, because that's why they're in this industry. And that's the thesis that we built CareForce Recruiter on, was we need to seek out caregivers at the time when they're most frustrated about their current work situation. They got off a shift that was terrible. They were just let go by an agency because a patient passed away, and the agency just laid them off because they didn't have another case. And attract those people, put them into a funnel, and let that agency tell the story about why they should be the employer of choice. The problem is that it's really, really hard to do that, because as an agency owner, you would love nothing more than to talk to every applicant on their own schedule. You would love to be able to share your values at the first meeting. You would love to be able to tell the story of what it's like to work for your company. But there's just not enough hours in the day to do that. So we built the technology to go engage that potential employee, and learn who they are. And then the moment they think about changing agencies, or perhaps they just got let go from an agency that is not a good place to work, we capture them, we nurture them through this cycle of learning about this agency. We get them set up for an interview, and we bring them into the team. And there's so many tools that we've learned about on the sales side of things that help caregivers not window shop agencies. And oftentimes getting there first with a message that you care and an easy process to come to work for you is all it takes. And I think that's the future of home care and the future of the best agencies that will win.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Capturing them at the right time, because there's so many options for caregivers, but capturing them at the right time with the right messaging is the perfect way to win over a caregiver for your agency.
It is, Lucas, and we know most of those decisions from caregivers are made at 11 o'clock at night. It's not on your time at 10 a.m., just when your recruiters got done with scheduling all the shifts that got missed last night and reschedule them and switched into recruiting mode and open up a portal to see what resumes might be there. Those caregivers have already thought about this, and they're talking to other agencies. And so the best agencies will have the tools in place to make that happen on the caregiver schedule, not on ours. In fact, I think the entire recruiting world, the career builders of the world, are all asleep at the wheel. They have had a business model that worked for so many years, and agency owners just continue to pay them money. And it's led to complacency. I think they're asleep at the wheel. In fact, even the tools they used are called things like applicant tracking systems, right, or ATS. We've changed that terminology, and it's a ADP, not the payroll company, but it's an applicant data platform, because we want to know everything there is to know about that caregiver so we can meet their needs as a great employee. We're not just there to track applicants. We're there to nurture future employees, future caregivers. Those are the people that are win, Lucas.
Absolutely. That's such good information. I think one of the last questions it's along these lines with the systems that you're building is what do you think home care, where's home care headed? What's the future hold? How does technology playing a part currently and in the future? And if somebody's interested in getting in the home care space, what's the future look like?
Yeah. So I got into home care because I felt a calling to be in this business. I wanted to, be in a place where I could help families, and I also wanted to make money too. All right, we all need to make money in the industry. We're investors, we're business owners. As much as I would like to believe this is a one caregiver for one family member business model forever, it's just not going to happen. Demographics are such that we will have a shortage of caregivers. Immigration policy, as we talked about earlier, is a moving target. And we know that there are many immigrants that are wonderful caregivers and are in their DNA to take care of families. And that's been a huge part of the model. I think it'll continue to be huge, but that has to be supplemented with technology in a couple of different ways. One is, I think, probably from a most efficient standpoint, is a remote caregiving model where through the use of technology and Alexa type devices and video screens like we're on today, one caregiver could theoretically provide at least remote services to family members, both from companionship to guidance and direction, and also assessing situations on a one-to-many scale. And it helps not only from a capacity standpoint for the agencies, but also from a cost standpoint for the families. And so I think we'll see the emergence of these virtual caregiving models. And then if you and I are speaking and I detect a change in behavior that I'm concerned about, then I'm going to dispatch a live caregiver to come out and help with the situation, call 911 if needed, or just be that extra layer of support there. And I think it's cost efficient for families. It's not intrusive. Now, the other side of that coin is from the area of AI and monitoring and in camera systems. While it feels intrusive to put camera systems in homes, my mom lives alone. I'm afraid for her. She wants to live alone, but if she falls, if she has behavior that is showing signs of deterioration and I'm not there, what am I going to do? And if I can get her to agree to have a system in place to help be an extra set of eyes, I think through AI, through virtual monitoring, whatever, we can detect small changes in behavior that will help us catch situations sooner and allow that family member to remain in the home where they want to be longer. And I'm a data junkie, I'm an AI junkie, but I care about families probably more than anything here. I think that I can sell that to my mom, and I think I can sell it to my sister, that this is one alternative that would allow my mom to stay in her home longer, more cost effectively. I think there's a roadmap for that. It's not going to be for everybody, but there's a roadmap, Lucas.
And it seems like that could be an entry point. That could be a low barrier entry point for families to start with some sort of monitoring service. And then as needs progress, actual caregiving services, in-person caregiving services. So it kind of lowers the barrier to entry for families to get matched up with a home care agency to start there and then work their way up as needs progress.
I think it does. And the risk is that if the home care agencies don't step in and do something like this, it'll be left to the mega cap companies who own the technology to do it, but they're not going to do it in a way that cares, right? And when it's time to go from a virtual caregiver model to where they have to dispatch somebody that is experienced in home care and can solve problems, there's going to be a gap in service.
Yeah,
so I think the leading agencies will put their toe in the water over the next year. They will embrace it in the next 2, and they will be fully on board in the next 3. And I think there's a slight demographic change with the adult sons and daughters who are having these conversations with their parents, and they're going to embrace the technology as well. And it will no longer feel as intrusive or like Big Brother.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the perfect place to sort of wrap things up. And thank you so much, Chuck, for giving our viewers and myself just insight with your years of experience and wisdom in the home care space, and learned a lot of good information. And I want to thank you for taking the time to join us.
It was great to be here, Lucas. Great seeing you again, and happy to help any home care agency owner that's thinking about jumping into the space. Spend 15-20 minutes with them and share some of the mistakes that I made in my early days, and because Lord, I have a list, right? So thank you.
Awesome. Well, this is Chuck Bailey, founder of True North, who joined us again on the Home Care Doors Open podcast. And thank you again. Everybody have a good day.
If you found this conversation valuable, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Also, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Business of Senior Care. We'll see you next time on Home Care. Doors open.